This is the Leaders on Fire podcast. On this show, we'll be inviting guests in to talk about crucible moments in their lives and unpack how it developed character and perseverance and how they emerged as leaders on fire. We hope that this podcast is an encouragement and an inspiration to you. Today, I'm excited to have Shaé Brown, founder and executive director of Kutoa Project. I've known Shaé now for many years, and she's a good friend, and we're also a supporter of the organization Kutoa Project. My wife serves on the board, and I've also had the privilege of being able to go visit them in Kenya to see the work they're doing firsthand. They have an awesome ministry, and Shaé has emerged truly as a leader on fire and is doing great things. So let's welcome Shaé to the show. Well, Shaé, welcome to the Leaders on Fire podcast. Super pumped to have you here today.
Thanks, Drew. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Shaé Brown. I grew up in Warsaw, Indiana, and my entire adult life has been in Kenya, which we're going to talk more about. I have a husband named Jason and a 2-year-old daughter named Abigail Grace. She's very funny right now, and we're getting into those big emotions with, being 2. I am a clinical licensed social worker and EMDR specialist and focus with working with kids who have come from trauma and do a lot of trauma trainings throughout the world. So
Awesome.
That's about me.
That's really cool. So what made you decide to get into that field of work?
Well, I grew up in foster care and was living with my grandma, who I call Mom, for most of my life, my sister and I, and got adopted later in life. I think I was 11. And then we actually went back into foster care. And during that time is when the church kind of came in. We weren't really going to church. And someone came when my mom was in the hospital with going through her chemo treatments from the church that we go to here in Warsaw. And they didn't know her family. They just came to offer her prayer. And that's how we got connected to the church and got involved. And so that's kind of where my story started to change. And I got connected to youth ministry through that church. And now that's my sending church for where I am in Kenya.
That's awesome. So specifically the counseling piece, what compelled you to decide to get into that work?
I really just wanted kids and young adults and even adults. I've worked with all populations. I started out working in foster care. I just really wanted to be a safe place. What's funny is I remember going through counseling in 8th grade when I was back in foster care and hated it. The only reason why I would go is because they said, oh, if you go, we'll go to Arby's and get mozzarella sticks. So I was like, fine, I'll go and I'll do that. But throughout my years of healing, I've just realized how important it was. So when I was in Kenya for 2 years after I graduated from Ball State, I graduated with a social work degree, not sure if I wanted to do counseling, but wanted to work with people. And during that time, I was like, you know what, this is what I want to do. I want to create safe spaces for people, but I love both individual and I love the macro, like big group setting too. So I love being a social worker and being able to do the clinical, but also being able to work with different populations and communities as well. So what we do at Kutoa Project fits all those things.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So we lit the fire.
Yeah.
Now we're going to fan the flame, okay?
Okay, I'm ready.
So tell us how you started Kutoa Project. I'm always super excited to hear about how young entrepreneurs get a vision to start something that really makes an impact. And you've done that. And so tell us a little bit about how you got into that.
I graduated from Ball State and a week later moved to Kenya. And my first trip to Kenya was in 2009. It was the first time I've ever been anywhere. And people asked why Kenya? And it was just a matter of it was convenient at that time. Someone offered me to go. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go. I'll do this trip. And it was incredible. But I remember it was 4 college students and there was a group of us. And it was the last day we were there. And they were like, oh, so who's coming back here? And I was like, I am not coming back here. God is calling me elsewhere. And I went elsewhere. I went to Thailand and Cambodia and Mozambique and all these other countries. I knew that I wanted to do international work. And I decided to go to all these places and work with different organizations. At that time, my focus was working with individuals who have been victims of sex trafficking. And so that was really the population I worked with. And then I was in Mozambique, and the whole time I was like, I could just go to Kenya. And so that was the summer before my senior year. And so I asked the organization I went with in 2009 if they were going to be having anybody come. And so a week later, after Ball State, packed up my bags and I left for Kenya. And during that time, I had a really difficult time that first year working with the first organization I was with. And I remember feeling like I should be there. And I called a mentor and she's like, you can get another job in Kenya. I'm like, I can? I'm allowed to do that? And so I started exploring and figured that out. And after I worked for a few organizations, I came home to take care of my mom. She was really sick at that point and decided to move forward with my master's degree in counseling, social work, to be able to do counseling. When that happened, I went to Haiti with some mentors that I just really loved and care about. And I just wanted to go somewhere different just to make sure, is Kenya where I want to be? And during that time, every single night, I kept having these dreams about this place in Kenya. And there were these young girls there. And so I thought maybe I was called to work in a children's home or something like that, but just kept feeling like safe place was the kind of theme that was coming out. And so I got some people to start praying about it. So we prayed for about a year before we'd started anything. At this point, I was in grad school. I just met Jason, who's now my husband. And on our first date, I told him, I said, I think I'm going to move back to Kenya. So if that sounds exciting and fun, then we could go on a second date. But that's what I'm here for. I'm going to get my master's degree and then I'm going back. And during that time, I wasn't really sure. I thought, once again, I could just work with organizations, but there really wasn't an organization that was wanting to work with others. And I just felt like I want to come in and help organizations create that holistic care and just focus on emotional, spiritual, and social support for these children so that they can thrive as young adults. And couldn't find it. So that's when Kutoa started. We had, like I said, we prayed for a year and then we started with prevention. So let's just do counseling and trainings and go from there. We don't know if we will have that home that I had those dreams about, but I love where we're going and what we're doing right now. So we'll just keep going.
That's awesome. I love that story. And for those that don't know, in my book, All In, I got to highlight you in there because you went all in. I mean, just hearing that story and just thinking about no, you put it all on the line and you went and you even told your boyfriend hey, this is what you're signing up for. I
mean, I told him on our first date. We weren't even a boyfriend, girlfriend.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But I love that story and I love there's a lot that, of course, we don't have time to share, but just the grit and the tenacity and just the environment and the circumstances and the character development that came from just literally going all in and making it happen was really, really cool. So enjoyed highlighting you in the book as an example of somebody who's gone all in. So, all right. Are you feeling warmed up yet?
I mean, this room is pretty warm.
It's actually kind of warm in here. I think it's 82, 83 in here. I'm not sure.
So I'm feeling as warm as I probably should be.
We intentionally, for the Leaders on Fire podcast, turn up the heat in here just so we can simulate the real life experience.
Yes, I'm the first person you did that for. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, are you ready to enter the crucible?
I'm ready.
Are you? Okay. So the crucible, we know that throughout our lives, and we also know that throughout Scripture, there's this idea of a crucible. And a crucible is when we go inside something that is an extremely difficult season or circumstance in life. The heat is cranked up. And God is using that to melt away impurities, character flaws, whatever those things are that need just purified. And the good news is that if we have the right mindset and we're pursuing the Lord, we know that we can emerge truly as a leader on fire and with our character refined. Although sometimes it can be really difficult, and it's also sometimes not until years later that we can look back and are actually thankful for that hard time. So, share with us a time or two, a crucible that you entered into that was difficult. And we want kind of the raw, gritty, gutsy part of it, so put it on the table.
Some of those.
Yeah, and then also share what perspective you gain from that.
I think running ministry, this is what's going to happen. Any job, any family. So yeah, I think when we first started Kutoa, like I said, we spent a year praying about it. So we didn't just jump right in. And then the first 6 months, I thought we were done and over, like crashed and burned really quickly on. And it was challenging. So what we do at our organization is we partner with other organizations, ministries, and families to help them thrive through mental, social, and spiritual support. And so we do that through counseling and trainings and then equipping them. And then we have all these different programs to help them spiritually through discipleship. When we started, I thought we found the most perfect partner. It was they were very well known in the area. They had a children's home and a school that they're about to open up. And I'm like, this is it. If we can get in with them, people will know our name. And I went to go visit them in December. So we became a 501c3 that June. And so we were spending time fundraising and preparing for my husband and I to make our big move. We went to this organization. Well, I went on my own. So I was by myself trying to figure this out. 6 months, not even 6 months married. So it was already challenging to be away. We went there and I knew that there were red flags, but I didn't want to see them at that time. And it became very clear I was there for 2 weeks. They basically wanted me and our organization to be fully operating with them, not working with anybody else. They wanted to build us a house, like giving us the world. And I kept saying, like, this sounds really great, but this is not our mission and vision. But it would have been super easy to steer off really quickly because it was easy. Fundraising wasn't going so easy for us. And this opportunity would have given us everything. Some stuff happened, some emotional stuff happened, some stuff was shared with our board. It was really messy really quickly. And it was clear I couldn't trust them. They didn't respect me. They even said that I was too young to do this. And then also, like I said, if we would have went with them, we would have completely drifted from our mission and vision so early on. So we had to make really hard change really quickly. And that happened December. My husband and I moved a few months later and had no partners. And so when we finally moved and we found new partners, we had two. One was really great, and we were really excited about the population. It was working with girls who have gotten pregnant as a teenager, and they were taking care of them and their babies. Well, we started the partnership with them, and pretty quickly on, we learned that there was sexual abuse happening there. So we had to go through all that process, and I kid you not, we've been in Kenya like 2 months. So we're dealing with all this, figuring that out, and I'm like, is this what it's gonna be, that we're not gonna be able to do this? And I was feeling really drained. My husband and I were in our first year of marriage, and we moved to a different country, one that I had community in and he did not. So we were trying to get him connected. So, you have the professional side, but you also have the personal side. And when you move, this, it's all together. Yeah. You're constantly meshing it. And so trying to figure out how to be a good wife, but also how do I start this organization? And slowly, God just kept saying, be patient, be patient. And we just said, you know what, maybe we're doing too many things. So we focused on this one organization. And that's when I started to just trust him more. I wasn't trying to find everything out. And we still work with that organization. And what's one of the beautiful things about what's happened is we stuck with it. This organization's had so many changes. And one of the things we're passionate about is restoration for families. Yes, we work with children in institutional care, but we know that God wants kids with families. And my own story, being in foster care and living with my grandma, people believed in restoration for my messy, messy family. And so we want to provide that for kids in this area where most of them will end up in a children's home because it's been easy, and it's that generational, in a children's home, they'll be taken care of. So one of the beautiful things is that home we started with and we're still working with, and they've transitioned fully to transitional care. But we were with them in the messy. They stayed with us when we did not know what the heck we were doing. And then the pandemic hit. And not only that, I lost my mom, and then I lost my close uncle. So I'm dealing with all of this. I had to stop doing counseling. I had this kid, and I always tell our team that when we have activities that you do with kids in counseling, always practice them first. So any sort of activity with a new game or cards, we need to make sure we know what we're doing, what it's saying, so that we can be there. And I remember flipping over this card. It was like a get to know you questions. And the question was, tell us about someone you lost. And the little boy looked at me, who's lost everything, and was like, should we just skip this question? because he knew I just lost my mom. And so I'm supposed to be the professional here, and my 8-year-old client recognized that I was not okay. So that's when I had to take time away. I wasn't my best leader. I wasn't my best wife. And honestly, during that time that we were on lockdown was really, really healing for my husband and I. I had no work to distract me from my grief. And so that was a really time that God really refined me and took away everything. And then I started to get coaching to kind of help me with leadership, because it was clear that I was not leading well. I was very reactive and very controlling. But once again, a lot of us were. We didn't know what to expect. And I just feel like that was one of those times where, yes, as a leader and professionally, I want to talk just about my organization, but personally, I was not okay. And it was affecting everything I was doing. So once I got time to heal, I went to counseling. I got the leadership coaching that I needed. I started to dig into my Bible. I didn't read my Bible for almost a year after I lost my mom. I was just so sad and just did not know what to do. And my husband also lost his grandma at that time. So we were both grieving and trying to navigate families that were grieving in a very hard time. And then also my organization doubled. We grew so fast during that time. Financially, we grew, and just our projects and programs grew. So it was a really great time for our organization. But if I would not have gotten what I need, got back into scripture, started telling people I'm not okay, I don't think we would have survived. And so I'm super thankful that during that time, I did what I tell my clients to do, what I tell my staff to do. I was burned out, and I needed help. And so
it sounds like, knowing you are a mover and shaker, and you like to get things done. You like to move things along. And so it sounds like you went over to Kenya like your guns were blazing, like you're ready to go do this thing. And door after door kept seeming to just like slam in the face. And it sounds like God used that to kind of dismantle your control, or this idea of like almost in Shea's strength, which we get excited about things sometimes in life and we start moving ahead in our strength.
Right.
And it sounded like God uses this crucible experience to really refine that and allow you to like give up control in a lot of ways, to yield to Him. And through that whole process, and then here you find yourself starting to dig into the Word, starting to really release control. And the next thing you know, it takes off. And when we think about those, it's like we get frustrated, like those first few months, what you wanted was for it to just take off. But that could have been disastrous. And it's interesting when we think about that, like what we don't know about ourselves and about what God's work is in our life, like that could have been destructive, and God knew that you weren't ready for it yet.
Yeah.
And when we're in those moments, it's so frustrating because we think we know we are, but we're really not yet.
And I had been so patient, right?
Yeah, you're like, I am being patient.
Yes, I am being patient. I don't know what more I need to do. And honestly, talking about this, which I shared with you earlier, like talking about those first 6 months, I feel like even now in my healing journey, I've just been able to talk about it. Emotionally really wrecked me that I was told I was too young. I was not equipped to do this. And I, just that time where you just feel like you're not, you just can't do it. And so, and not even that, like I wasn't mature enough to do it. And so someone else is saying that and then telling other people who are behind me in this, and then they're questioning. And so it just emotionally was me constantly needing to prove myself. And I think that we really, and I know I shared this in your book too, like having singles on the field, we will do anything. We're willing to go. We don't have families yet. We can go and do things, and we're excited and we're young. And I was at that stage, but also I was ready and I had done the hard work, but it brought me down. And then, like I said, I lost my mom, and then it all started to be like, well, now what do I do? And now my person is gone. And so I will say that even though that happened, that was 2015, I feel like just now, and I just now feel like I can finally start talking about it in a way where I don't like push it down. And I actually, what's interesting is that same organization recently came to us last year and asked for our services. And so it felt like a big And it kind of triggered me a bit. And I had to talk to my leader, my Kenyan leader and Kenyan colleague over there. And I explained to her everything that happened. And I hadn't shared that with anyone. And so I just shared like, hey, I'm really excited about this, but I also want you to know that this is what happened. And so even in those moments, it still comes back. And so still have healing to do always as we are growing and learning and doing tasks. And I feel like I am constantly learning how to let things go in a way that's part of my healing journey, but is helping me be a better leader. And I feel like that's the stage I'm in. I'm learning to be a better leader. And I've loved what our organization is, like I said, and I love the leader that I've become through doing all the hard work.
Yeah.
Which has not been easy.
The young entrepreneurs or nonprofit starters, like it just takes time and grit and perseverance. It just takes time. And it's frustrating especially for like go-getters, right? Like it's just can be frustrating, but being able to look back and being thankful for all of those things along the way that's brought you here. And
but also being humble and willing to say I made a mistake and willing to be humble in front of your team of like, hey, I messed up here, especially cross-culturally. And I'm sure Riley can, attest to that too. When you work cross-culturally, you constantly need to make sure that you're being humble to your team and asking questions, because it's easy for us to come in and try to fix it all. But the way our organization ran back then versus the way it runs right now is completely different. I really want our team taking charge. So there are things I have to let go of. I have to let go of what colors we choose for the rooms, because I might like a more neutral, but I know the culture loves brighter and things like that. And so, and I know that's small, but those are little things that make a big difference when you let your team take over.
Yeah. Well, it's really cool. And, we had the privilege, our family, last year in March, of taking our whole family and our niece over to visit you guys in Kenya and the team. And do some leadership training with them. And it was just really impressive. Like I wasn't there in the beginning. And so I had the privilege of seeing like this established organization. You've now got a field leader, director that's there on the field, a Kenyan that's leading the team there locally. And just the maturity of the organization, it's really, really cool to see. And it was great to see that firsthand and be able to be a part of that. Okay. So Kutoa's doing some great things. A lot of good stuff going. You're considering the future, how to continue to expand Kutoa. I know just from knowing you over the last many years of, what areas do you focus on? What areas do you grow? How do you scale it? How do you grow it? And then you've got the personal dynamic of you and your husband Jason, and now Abigail in the mix, and trying to figure out that balance of how long are we in Kenya and how long are we home. So you're in a different season now, right?
Yes.
Like the organization is doing well. It has grown. Your family life has also grown and changed through that time now.
Yeah.
So how does that look and feel now, and what pressures and things are you dealing with now in light of kind of how all that's evolved and what you see for the future?
Yeah, it is crazy to think, just going through and, as we're doing this, you start to think of other things, right? When you're talking about it. And I just realized too that during the time I was doing leadership, my husband and I were wanting to start a family. And it took us 2.5 years to have our daughter. Now she's here and we're in this season, like you said. And I do, when I was talking to you, I do think that I'm in another season of grief, but it's a good grief. It's a season of when we started Kutoa, we said we wanted to do things in a way that was always empowering Kenyans and nationals to take over. We want Kenyans empowering Kenyans. And so now we're in this season where that's happening. And I feel like a couple years ago, I really had to wrestle with God about, he could take Kutoa away from me. And then what am I? Right? And dealing with, I think everybody who starts is the founder of something. We always have to take that into consideration. We get to this point to where I wanted to be a mom and it wasn't happening. So I was like, okay, well, is this it? And then God just like, hey, this also is not your identity either. Your identity is in me. And so being in this season now where, like you said, we have a Kenyan director, that happened a couple years ago. And my husband and I have decided to do about 50-50. We're in the States and in Kenya and letting them lead. And that has been so hard. It's been hard because Kenya's been my home. My adult life's been there. All my friends are there. And I love my job so much. And I feel like I have two different jobs. I have here, which is donor management and fundraising, which is also part of the job that I love. But over there, I'm in the field, right? But now they are fully taking over, and that's what we want. And so we're in this season now of navigating that, having people ask me every single day, so when are you going back? Where are you now? And this and this. And I have found over the last year, I've been really defensive of this grief that I was carrying, of what does this look like for me now? And who is Shaé? Like, who am I? Can I dream outside Kutoa? Am I allowed to do that? Am I allowed to dream? And I know when I was on maternity leave, I was like, I don't ever want to go back to work. But then I was like, yeah, I want to go back to work. And so all of these things have been happening. And so I was sharing with you that I do feel like I'm in one right now, but it's in a good way. It's a way of, this was the goal, that Kenyans are empowering Kenyans and that our team could do this. And I get to step back and watch them, and it's beautiful, but I'm also in a season of, I want to be there too, but I know this is what's best. And then also navigating, what does our new life look like? Yeah. And it's a 2-for-1. There is no Kutoa Project in the Brown family. It's all meshed into one, because that's been our lives for the last 9 years. And I'm thankful for that, but it does come at a cost. We're always grieving. We're always grieving wanting to be in Kenya. When we're in Kenya, we're always grieving wanting to be here. And it's a beautiful thing that we get to have. And so I just want to encourage others that any job you have, any family life, whatever you have, it's going to keep, the journey is not, oh, we've made it, we're up the valley, we're down the valley. Nope. It's sometimes a steady grief, but to look at the grief in a way that there can be joy in this grief. I'm so thankful for the last few years in Kenya. My husband, I don't know. We don't know if we're going to have a season fully in Kenya again. We don't know if we're going to have a season in another country. We're praying about it. We're about to open up our second office in Kenya. And so that's a huge step for us as a ministry to figure out what that looks like. And we don't know. We have offers to do it in other places. We went to H&H and helped them, and I loved doing that. And so I don't know what it is, but for the first time in 9 years, my team is handling it. And me as a person, I get to be like, what do I want professionally and personally? Because we've been in survival, trying to start this organization, trying to make sure they have what they need and equipping them. And do they have the money they need? Can I pay my team? And then now we're in a season where things are good, but there's also grief.
So how has this season that you're in now drawn you closer to Jesus? Like, has it affected your dependence, or has it pushed you away? I mean, sometimes depending on where you're at, it can be difficult. So how has it impacted that?
I think if I'm being honest and raw, which is what this podcast is about, it's been both. There's been times where I feel like I am very dependent on God, and then I feel like there's times where I'm like, I just need a break from everything. And by break, I mean just a couple days of just, what am I supposed to be doing? Especially, people have good intentions, but people are people, and sometimes people say things that are hurtful. And I remember someone saying like, oh, well, you don't live in Kenya anymore, so what's it matter what your team does? And I'm like, ooh, okay. I definitely know that one of the things that I've been working through is setting boundaries and realizing, you have kids, there's just, you don't have as much time anymore. And on top of that, my ministry is also thriving, and I just have to stay focused on our mission and vision. And I know that this season is all about developing my leaders. If we're going to expand outside of that, I need to make sure my leadership, my personal leadership, solid, my team's leadership solid, and that they have everything they need to thrive. So I do feel like the dependence on God has been there. And I feel like I keep going back to the story of Ruth, right? Like, she had all of this happen, and she was some ordinary woman. She didn't want her name to be famous, and she just had multiple things happen, but she stayed, and she stayed in it, and God blessed her through that. And so I feel like I know what God's called us to do. And when I get distracted by voices or even my own desires, I have to remember this is what He wants, and he'll bring me back if I'm not on track. And He just keeps providing, even if it's relationships, providing just through my healing process with counseling, and even providing friends, right? To like work through this. When you live in a different culture and then you move back to your hometown, I'm learning what to be like Shea in my hometown, but I'm not the same girl. I'm not a little girl anymore. I'm a grown woman who has a career, and I love my job, and I'm excited to see how God is going to set me apart from my identity only being Kutoa Project, because that's what it's been. So what does that look like, and how can I continue to show others his love and also continue to be myself in this new era.
Yeah. Man, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing all that and for just being open about that. And, it's clear to me that these crucible seasons in your life have definitely shaped and formed you, and you're entering into, like you said, another one where you're exploring what this next phase, this next journey looks like. And while it's exciting, it can also be difficult, to navigate that and kind of find where am I at in this situation and trusting God. So there's no doubt that you have emerged as a leader on fire. Your dependence on God, and you're continuing to trust Him for the next thing. So thank you for sharing all that with us, Shea, and super pumped that you were able to join us on the show.
Thank you, Drew. Excited for your show.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Perhaps it has prompted a painful memory or challenged you to reflect on times you were in the crucible. Some of you may be in a crucible now, but be encouraged. Maybe, just maybe, God is using this to refine your character so that you emerge as a leader on fire. If today's episode was an encouragement to you, share it with others who may also find encouragement in the Leaders on Fire podcast. So, let's go into the world sent out as leaders on fire. Until next time.